country. Hockey is our secular religion, whatever other faith beliefs may be. And we all know what, of course, happened in Saskatchewan last Friday, late afternoon. This is Humboldt Strong, and many of you here are student athletes here. I tip my hat. I also tip my hat to the choir members and people in other organizations and clubs who travel a lot. As a parent, I worry. As a professor, I worry when on Friday, February or January, the volleyball team, say, goes up to Grand Prairie for a weekend of games and it's icy and snowy. I worry. You know, the odds are nothing is going to happen, but things do occasionally. My son Colden, he is in the choir, and he also is part of the Kokopelli choir in Edmonton. It's a quite renowned choir. Twice a week, roughly, during the winter months, off to Edmonton he goes in the evening. Some nights the roads are icy. I worry. So we all worry, friends and loved ones, and it's unimaginable, of course, what happened. So this is to honor the student athletes and all the other students, and really the boys in Humboldt who come from 3 provinces. And just the athletic story. I have always been interested in sports. I started undergrad as a phys ed major because I played some sports in high school, and switched to history after my first year and took some summer courses to catch up, and I graduated with a history degree as an undergrad. I learned that I would love teaching as a camp counselor in Ontario during my undergrad years. I was an athletic director for the girls, and I went to 9 to 11-year-old boys as my main crew to deal with. And it was a lot of fun, and it sort of hit me then that I might enjoy teaching. So it's 51 years in the classroom, 36 years here. So I'm going to put the hockey stick down lest I hurt myself. And also, this will come off soon because there's a story under here. Still got that slide up, okay. You know how I teach, so I'm sort of winging it to a degree, but I have some kind of idea as well. A week ago, greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. And this is Stephen Hawking. The interesting thing here, obviously, of course, he died, a month or more ago, I guess now. This was in the Edmonton Journal the next day. It was huge articles, of course, about the scientist, physicist. And the day that he died was the day that Alex Ho told me, after class, he came, was waiting in the hall. He said that, Räni, you've been chosen to do this last lecture on April 11th. And so there's a little bit of that. And of course, I really believe in this. The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance. It is the illusion of knowledge. Fake news, fake news, fake news. But you know what? The big lie and stuff, half-baked news might be even worse. Where if it's so fake and so big lie, think of Hitler there. And of course, fake news, who do you think about on that one? The Donald, right? And a lot of it can be dismissed by educated people. Well, that's a lot of bullshit. That's a lie. But half-baked stuff where people, all the internet is getting in there and people are, getting their little bits in here and there. Multitasking, the 45-second minute, and it's rush. And certain things are breaking down in my mind in society. The ability and the time to sort of reflect on things and take some time off and get off those machines and things. And be by yourself and be happy in your skin and those kinds of things. So I'm a little concerned about that. At the same time, I'm extremely confident in you. And most of you here are my current or former students, young people. I'm extremely confident. But I'm also, a little concerned about some of the trends that society is taking in a number of directions. And I don't have time to elaborate, and I actually want to keep this more or less upbeat as well. So we're living in an information age, but information itself seems almost to be in a free fall at times. We get little bits here, little bits there, fragments, distraction, and where do we go with it? We make erroneous decisions based on just little bits of information, scraps of information, and so on. I stand on Treaty 6 land, and anywhere I go in Canada, I'm standing on Indigenous land and I respect it. I'm a great believer that all of us are in this ship called Canada, and we need to sail it through waters that are shark infested at times, shoals and reefs. It makes me think of the great Canadian who died a year or two ago, Leonard Cohen, and his democracy is coming to the USA. Well, I believe that democracy is coming to Canada, and it takes all of us, white, black, Indigenous, and immigrants, fresh and old. I'm a 3-time immigrant. I've been a refugee. So I was a little disheartened. As a historian, I sort of know a little more backstory on some issues anyway. When we had the Canada 150, and yes, Ottawa is on Algonquin land, the Ottawa Valley, no question about it, and I respect it. But there was a there was a chance to give a little backstory at that time. That yes, it's Algonquin land, but it would have been Oneida, Onondaga, or Mohawk land probably if Samuel de Champlain had not been there. Now, the Europeans came in. That's just the way it's been. What is past cannot be undone, but we can heal and build and go forward. Champlain, of all those early conquistadors, explorers, patronizers, racists, whatever, he was about as good as it gets. About as good as it gets. He had a heart, he had a mind, he had a kindness inside him. Yes, he was a colonizer, but he helped the Algonquin. He respected them. And he helped the Algonquin fight off the Mohawk. And then later the Onondaga and Oneida were coming. These are the Iroquois Confederacy that are largely found in northern New York State now. So I thought that was a moment lost where we could have said, we're going forward together. French Canadian, English Canadian, immigrant, white, black, Indigenous, everybody. We go together. That's the only way to do it. So, anyway. So we got to show some pictures. We better roll it. There you go, Ken. Okay. This is Tallinn, Estonia. And the building you see there, Oleviste kirik, in Estonian, in English that's St. Olav's Church. In the medieval period, that was the tallest building for about 2 centuries on the planet. It's actually been shortened a little bit because of lightning strikes. The steeple was even higher. And we climbed up in there last September. And by the way, Peter Mirowski, where are you there? Peter! He's in the back there, my colleague. And Peter got me back to my roots a little bit. I've always been a proud Estonian, proud Canadian, of course. And I speak the Estonian language. I grew up with it at home, didn't speak English until I was 5. Peter, on a trip to Czech Republic some years ago, decided to take a 3-day trip or something like that to Tallinn to check out Estonia. We've had that kind of Estonia program in the works, as some of you know. And he kind of fell in love with Estonia, thought it was such a cool place. And make a long story short, he and I went to a history conference there back in 2016. And last year I returned with family. During that 3-week thing, I was gone. I was in Estonia. This is the capital. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the old town of Tallinn. It's the best preserved such town in Northern Europe. And I was born within a kilometer of that church during the Soviet air raid in 1944. I was born in the basement of the hospital with generators because the building was being bombed. And now it's a fancy hotel where Peter and I spent a couple of nights during our visit to Estonia back in 2016. And the basement of this hotel, it's a hotel now, the Santa Barbara, St. Barbara. It was a maternity hospital back in the day, and now it's a classy boutique kind of hotel. And the basement, it's got all the old stone arches and things. That's where you eat breakfast. That's where you drink your beer. So it's so cool. Estonia invented Skype. Yes, they did. Check it out. I don't know where I fell off the boat, because I'm the least technological. That's why Ken's doing the clicking, because, again, I didn't want to electrocute myself. So anyway, so let's, Ken, there you go. Bloodlands! Very quickly, this is a fabulous book by historian Timothy Snyder. This, of course, is the area between Russia and Germany. I like to call it a bad neighborhood. Historically, little guys like us, Latvians, Lithuanians, even Poland, where we've got 30+ million people, we've been screwed over so many times. And yet, hey, we have the language. There's only 1 million of us. We have the language. And the singing revolution and all that stuff. But the Soviets were coming. We were among the last people to get out. Red Army's on the east side of Tallinn. We're heading out the west end. And Soviet airplanes are strafing us on the way. And I get whacked out, no Colden. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So, and of course, Nazi Germany's on the other side. And 500 years ago, Germany was, well, not 500, but the Teutonic Knights brought Christianity to Estonia at the point of a sword, of course. And, but, you know, the Germans ruled, the Russian czars, and Estonia then was independent for 20 years, and then Stalin and Hitler divided it all up, and finally the Red Army comes back and we get out. We were among the last people to get out. And, of course, Estonia remained behind the Iron Curtain until the singing revolution, basically 89, 90, 91, that period. And it's done remarkably well. It's a member of NATO, a member of the European Union. It's highly literate and English speaking, and so it's a great place to go. It's a pretty countryside, lots of forest and swamps and coastline. 13,000 kilometers of coastline, tiny place. It's like that. Okay, enough of the Bloodlands. That's me in the middle. In a UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation camp in southern Germany. I was, what would I be there? What'd you say, 2 years maybe, a toddler or something? It's my mom and dad. And no, my dad's not a Hasidic Jew. If you look at the picture, if you look at the picture, this was pointed out to me by my brother-in-law. That's my legendary brother-in-law, Ron, there, wave. I mention him occasionally. Some of you guys have heard me. He's done this, he's done that, you know. But Ron looked at this picture a few months ago and he said, Räni, did you realize that it looks like your dad's got those tendrils that the Hasidic Jews wear? And I looked at it. It's the fence post, of course. I said, no, I'm not a Hasidic Jew. Nothing wrong with it, but I'm not. And so we had a lot of time on our hands. 3 square meals and nothing much else to do. Hang around, walk and hike. And I remember being carried up below mountain in a backpack. My head was sticking out. My dad was carrying me up. And anyway, roll it. We were just walking around. Okay, now there's Pops, my dad. My dad got me into mountain climbing in the Adirondacks, northern New York, where they have the Olympic Games, and Lake Placid a few times. He's got a beard, he's got a beret, he was a beatnik, he was a professional musician in Estonia, double bass, you know that. He was a poet, published poet in Estonian. And we went off, I was 17, and he was whatever, he was in his pushing 60. And we did some crazy stuff. This is totally dangerous. I was up in a tree taking a picture. He's hanging on. We go home. Of course, you have to wait in those days, like 10 days to get the pictures processed. We get them. The Kodak mailer comes home and with real stamps on it, you know, from Rochester, New York, Kodak, right? Which is, of course, defunct now. And so my mother saw this. She says, oh, I can't think of this. Every time we went off, she was worried we'd never come back. So anyway, this is the upper reaches of the Hudson River. Just the stream flows out of Lake Tyr of the Clouds, which is about as beautiful, poetic a name for a lake that you can possibly find. It's almost as good as Hoarfrost River, Northwest Territories, or Wandering River, Alberta. Lake Tyr of the Clouds, how good does that get? And that's the Hudson River. You can drink out of it. I wouldn't drink out of the Hudson around New York City, of course, but that's where it begins, so almost the beginning. So anyway, okay. There, that's me in the middle. Hair. And my dad, he had shaved his beard. That's my buddy Jack from Buffalo there on the right. We became friends in undergrad. And then he joined my dad and I for these annual climbing trips. And we did some crazy stuff. And it was really great. I mean, tough stuff. This is on Big Slide Mountain in the Adirondacks. The Adirondacks have some serious climbing, just like Scotland has serious climbing. Nothing like our Rockies, but people die in these mountains because of different conditions, rocks and steepness and so on. Okay, so I got into mountains. I love mountains very much. My dad. Here I am, it's me there, back in the Adirondacks. I was teaching in Montreal. And this is a United Nations crew. These are my high school students at Rosemont High School, East End, Montreal. Part of the Protestant school board, so we were English speaking there. I'm about 34 years old there. And the fellow on the left is Japanese ethnic. Girl in the front, Russian. The boy on the right, extreme right, Greek. And the fellow with the red headband, French-Canadian. And sadly, he died a couple years later of brain cancer. And so I took students climbing, skiing, all these kinds of things, and I've had this picture for a long time in my office, and I went and took a photo of it because, hey, I love teaching, and this was a unique group from all over the place, truly a United Nations kind of crew. Okay, Ken. Now, this is from Ireland 5 years ago, and the fellow on the right, sadly, died last November. Robert Nix from Colden Lake, Alberta. Some of you might know him. He was part of a group of 8 that I took to Ireland. Some of us had finished just climbing Mount Brandon, which is the second highest mountain in Ireland. You can't see it in the background. Everything was socked in. But I thought I'd show this one. This is more recent. And sadly, Robert died suddenly last fall. So over the years, I have lost a number of students. So I'm very fortunate myself at my age to still be, but but anyway, life goes on. We keep rolling. Okay, Ken. Now that's my daughter Phaedra on her first mountain. This is Lake Louise. That's Mount Victoria in the background. We're on Mount Fairview. And she's now 25. And okay, next. And that is Colden. This is on Mount St. Piran, which is outside or just above Lake Louise, too. He was 5, going on 6. There's an ice axe in his hand. We didn't really need it. But on the way down, I'd sort of taught him how to do a self-arrest with an ice axe. So when you not only use it to stick in the ice, but if you start sliding, you're supposed to clutch it and dig it in so you stop the slide. And we're coming off of this mountain. There were several others with us, of course. He was the youngest. We did some awful stuff to the kids. And we almost all got drowned up in the Yukon, canoeing, 370K with no experience. But as we're coming down, he slipped a little bit. He needed a perfect ice axe arrest on the gravel. Do you remember that? Yeah. So I thought I'd throw that one in there. I got millions of pictures, of course, but and this is my partner over there, Danella, and this is just a couple years ago on Mount Fairview, and so yeah, we're still into it every year, try to knock off a couple of peaks and so on. So, okay, I guess go a little bit more now. Now that's me on Mount Boland. That's Maureen Lake there over here. That's the one at next to Lake Louise. This is a more serious climb. And this was 20 years ago. I've sort of quit doing the really hairy stuff. And that's the parking lot there. Most of you have probably been to Maureen Lake, and if you haven't, you should go there because it's spectacular. It's right next to Lake Louise, essentially. So this is Mount Boland. It's one of those 10 peaks that were on the old $20 bill on the back. And Colden rattled them off in a mountain shop in Banff when he was maybe, 6, 7 years old. We're visiting a mountain shop, and there's a big poster of these 10 peaks. And I don't know if he said it or I said it, that my son can rattle off all the names, and half of the names are indigenous. Neptuak, Wankchemna, names like that. This is Boland. Some of them are English, others are indigenous names. And he rattles them off. The guy was just gobsmacked there in the shop because he was able to, at age 6 or whatever, rattle off 10 mountain names that weren't easy names. So he's gotten into it too, and he's climbed in New Zealand now and other places as well. Roll it, Ken. Now this is Maureen Lake from Mount Temple Summit. Jack and I did it, and I did it another time again. Spectacular climb. Danella did it before I met her with her girlfriend. It's that biggest mountain at Lake Louise, the big one that dominates the skyline. These are cornices, extremely dangerous. You don't want to step on them. Of course, the lake is there. That's the parking lot at Maureen Lake. So I love mountains. I love the wilderness, the outdoors, and all that stuff. So, all right. Now, movies. Movies. Who's seen this one? Okay, a few people have. This is one of my favorites. Master and Commander is number 1. But Cool Hand Luke, Paul Newman, when he was in his prime, the classic, iconoclastic, classic nonconformist in this movie. It's set in Mississippi or one of those southern states. He's a guy who he does petty crime. Like he got in trouble for cutting off with a metal cutter, pipe cutter, the tops of parking meters. And he got arrested, and in Mississippi you go to the farm. It's a prison farm. The warden is called the captain. And you go out, what do? You go and work on a chain gang. Sometimes you're literally chained up, shackled. And you're cutting the grass, with size and stuff. You're paving backcountry roads, straightening out gravel, doing all kinds of stuff. And, of course, there's guys with shotguns and aviator glasses, reflective glasses watching you and everything. He tries to escape. He escapes. He's back, and he gets punished. He's just coming up like the Energizer Bunny, just taking more. And I'm not going to say how this movie turns out, but it's a classic. It truly is a classic.
And there's a classic line in it, the captain near the end. And some of you, I think many of you, have maybe heard this line. Luke's in trouble. Things aren't looking good. And the captain's looking down at him. And he says, captain talking here, what we have here is a failure to communicate. Have you heard that one? Hey, how cool is that? And here I'm getting back to a little bit of the issue of we're not always communicating as well as we could, the backstory. And I want to briefly talk about oil. I know it's Alberta, so we should be, whatever, but it's a controversial topic, obviously, and it's an issue right now, BC, and of course, and so on. But I want to talk about oil because getting back to Abraham Lincoln, was once asked, when there's a problem or an issue that's complicated, what do you do? He said, well, I'm in the north, I'll look down at the south. And then I'm going to go south. Of course, there's a Civil War north-south. We think, well, maybe that's it right now. He says, no, and then I go to the west and I look east, and then I go to east and I look west. I look at something from four sides. I try to get the big picture, the whole story. And it made me think of several things, and the oil thing. I am, I think, pedigreed as an environmentalist. I love the mountains, I love clean water, but I'm also a modern man. I like driving on asphalt. I like the Alberta economy. I've been up in the oil sands, and they're cleaner than they've ever been. I have former students who are working in pipeline, and they're talking about all the monitors and the sensors and things that are going into it. We're losing $35 on every barrel, shipping only to the States. The Alberta economy, until recently, was known as the engine that fuels, the engine that drives the country. Over 2,000 products are made from oil. My fleece jacket that I had on is petrochemical. This stuff, our smartphones, our computers, petrochemicals. Medicines, rubber tires, electric cars have plastic. So I know it's a kind of a tough thing, but it's also part of the Industrial Revolution, which started in England, of course, at a certain time, not terribly long ago, and there was a lot of resistance and a lot of risk when the steam came up and all that stuff. Show the next one particularly. And this is an iconic picture. The industrial age brought, of course, a lot of negatives. 30 years ago, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, Ohio, caught fire because of the chemicals and the toxins. Now you can, well, I wouldn't drink out of it, but it's clean. Acid rain was a big issue. We fixed it. Pipelines occasionally leak. But if we didn't risk anything, we'd be in log cabins and teepees. And that's the truth as a society. We are modern people with our fleece jackets, our Gore-Tex, which is petrochemical, all our stuff, the boot soles that we have. Even if we have leather shoes, the soles are rubber and stuff. It's a complicated topic. It's an economic topic. And the industrial age brought millions out of poverty around the globe. The industrial age, coal, yes, dirty, but got cleaned up more. Other things replaced it. Fossil fuels replaced whale oil. Whales were being hunted in huge numbers. America alone had 700 ships hunting whales. Whale oil lit the lamps of the world. Well, that's not happening anymore. So it's got a backstory to it. And I don't want to spill, but I do know that tankers now are double-hulled. In the Bosporus Strait that links the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, Russian oil tankers come through the most crowded waterway on the planet and no accidents. Tugboats, everybody's secure. Ferry boats are scurrying about, no problems. And certainly the city of Istanbul, one of the world's great cities, does not want a major crash or leak of a tanker. The tankers are much safer. The ones that are going to be sailing out of BC, and they're already sailing anyway, and the pipeline already exists. It goes through Jasper National Park, for Pete's sakes. And the new pipeline will go right next to it, and the old one will be monitored as they're digging up the trenches for the new one. In the new generation, I have a few students here who work in pipe, and they assure me that it's so much safer than trains. So I just want the other side of it. And it also bothers me, Quebec bothers me more than BC on this issue. Because they bring in oil by tanker and pipeline from Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Iraq, and Iran. And the east coastline is just as beautiful in the St. Lawrence Riverways, in my mind, as the west coast. That's a reality. East End Montreal refines at Saint Tremblant, and I don't know, there's these names there, Pontigny. Pointe-aux-Trembles, there it is, Point of Trembles. They refine the stuff there. It's foreign oil. It's foreign oil. We have enough oil in this country to supply everybody. And asphalt roads are bitumen. Look it up in the dictionary. You don't want to drive to Vancouver on gravel. So we need just a little bit more of that kind of that bigger picture and balance. Instead of, oh yeah, we want to save the environment and save the planet. I'm all for that. But I'm also for some of the comforts and the life expectancies that are so much better because of the industrial age and all the outcomes of health and the machines and the Siemens. When I had that MRI for my knee, it was a plastic hunk of thing made in Germany, petrochemicals. So it's everywhere. We just have to be careful and smart about it. This is a steamboat. This is the most famous painting, apparently, according to the BBC poll a few years ago, as to what is the most important painting in British history. And there were several presented, and they chose the Fighting Temeraire. The Temeraire is the old wooden ship, the hero ship of Trafalgar that saved Nelson's day in this crucial battle against the French Empire and Napoleon. Now, 30 years later, it's being towed for destruction by, as one person called it at the time, an ugly, steam-belching, monstrous, hideous vehicle, spewing out smoke, coal smoke, of course, fire and all that stuff. Painted by Turner, the great impressionist that the French learned from. And this movie, if you saw James Bond's Skyfall movie, James Bond, I'm 008 by the way, 007, some of you know that story. Bond is with M. They're sitting on a bench in the National Museum, the Art Gallery in London, and they're looking at this painting. And of course, they're talking, secret stuff, all the Bond stuff, and probably, what woman he's going to have that night or something. But so they're looking at this, and it was not placed there accidentally in that movie. This is the movie where Adele sang that song, Skyfall. And I thought, as soon as I saw this in the movie, I said, woohoo, I'm so excited. Because I love the old wooden ships of sail. The wind power, fabulous. But hey, modern world. We fly in airplanes that take jet fuel. Nothing else will replace jet fuel probably in your lifetime, unless it's nuclear or something. So there are risks. You just got to balance it out. That's how I see it anyway. Great painting. The ship was broken up. A few people were able to salvage a few pieces and make chairs out of it or something. But it was one of the hero ships because it fought at Trafalgar, the decisive naval battle in 1805 between the French Empire and the British. The British won. The big ship was a victory, of course. Nelson, the great admiral, died in the battle, but he learned that he had won, of course, before he died. And this was a ship that came to the Victory's rescue and was a so-called hero ship in the great age of sail. Okay, what do we have next? This is another one that might, ruffle a few feathers here. This is Robert E. Lee, Confederate general, former United States officer, West Pointer, an American, a Virginian. There was one slave in his family some years earlier. He freed it. He was not in favor of secession, but he went with Virginia when Virginia seceded, as some of us might go with Alberta when Alberta secedes. It's just, Lee, this, of course, brings up the statues, the memory of the Civil War. We remember the American Civil War in any number of ways. Yes, the white supremacists got to go, and they are going, basically. Statues that commemorate the White Leagues of the Ku Klux Klan, many have already been removed, and they should all be gone. Robert E. Lee, I have some concerns with, particularly this statue. First of all, he fought a noble war without atrocities. This is in the chapel of Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia. He's buried under it. His wife is buried under it. His kids are buried under it. Confederate flag up there in the corner, and there are several others actually from the battles. Names of battles are stitched in. After the war, most top Confederates started writing all kinds of books and blaming everybody else for the issues and continually talking about, it wasn't about slavery, it was states' rights. Those of you who are my students, you've all heard me. That the irreducible cause of the Civil War was slavery. You know, I'm always for the little guy. Whether it's an Estonian little guy or an Irish little guy or somebody being colonized in Africa or the natives of Canada, I have a good record, and I stand by it. But this man, yes, he fought on the wrong side, a side that did fight to save slavery. But in his mind, he fought for his state. He went with his state. He said, I can't draw my sword against Virginia. Anyway, he fought the war. After the war, he was invited to be president of Washington College, a small liberal arts school in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley of Virginia that was failing failing, financially. Obviously, Civil War ruined the South. Cost a lot of money for the North, too. $750,000 debt combined. A lot of the other generals, again, were writing apologias, bitching and moaning and groaning about everything, blaming everybody but themselves for whatever happened. This man accepted the job. Of course, his fame also, of course, attracted a lot of first-year students. He resurrected the school. He served as president of Washington College for 5 years, died on campus, and was buried in the chapel. This is like our faith in life. I don't want to be buried there. But, but you get the picture, right? This man also revitalized the curriculum and, according to some evidence, was the first to suggest that Washington College offer electives. So it's not only, you're focusing on a narrow major history as these guys up here, for example. But all of us know that when you do the undergraduate degree, 2/3 of your courses are outside your major. Lee was one of the founding fathers of that kind of thinking. He contributed to the rehabilitation and the education of the South. He fought a noble war, yes, on the wrong side, but he was not a cruel man. And this statue has to stay and should stay. And here's a little bit more of the backstory. It was called Washington College. It was renamed Washington and Lee after his death, and now it's Washington Lee University. George Washington, one could argue, chose slavery over the United States. He was the presiding officer of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787. He was a slave owner, third or fourth wealthiest man in America, and his fortune was built on slavery. He, of course, becomes the first president and the hero of the Revolution. When he was first president, by the way, getting back to the Constitutional Convention in 1787, the South was not willing to sign on unless slavery was protected. And slavery would be protected because the Constitution was more important than this slavery issue, and slavery was put on the back burner, which of course eventually was resolved through a bloody civil war. A civil war that didn't fix all the problems, as we well know, through Black Lives Matter and all the other crap that's gone on, and all that stuff I talked about in this morning's class in the civil rights section of the American Intro. So George Washington, when he was president, first of all, he was ready to sort of, maybe you shouldn't sign this thing, but slavery is not protected. Slavery was protected, and the 35th rule came in, all that kind of nonsense. And so slavery was put on the back burner as an issue for America to deal with. And 87 years later, Lincoln 7 years ago, Civil War. George Washington, during his first presidency, there was no Washington, D.C. yet. It would be built later. He went to Philadelphia. Philadelphia was free soil at that time. This was, of course, well before the Civil War. He came from Virginia, which was slave soil, slavery. And with him, he brought a couple of his household slaves. One of them was Ona Judge, 16-year-old African-American girl, house servant. He liked her. There was no, abuse, but she was a slave. She did his bidding. And we don't know exactly what other men might have done with her or whatever. Just don't know. She escaped because she was on free soil. She ran away. And George Washington spent good money hiring slave catchers to track her down. He was president of the United States on free soil himself in Pennsylvania, temporary capital of Philadelphia. He never got her. She was tracked down as far north as New Hampshire, close to the Canadian border, and then she disappears from history. Ona Judge. Who are we to judge Robert E. Lee, or what Washington might have chosen as a top officer in the United States military, and Virginia secedes in 1860-61? Would he have gone with Virginia, or would he have stayed loyal to the United States? We don't know. But it's something, again, there's a backstory there. I went to the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. The Lyceum is a classic, Greek columned administration building there. And recently there was some talk of, because it was built by slave labor, which it was, the school opened in 1848, that maybe that gorgeous building should be torn down. Well, there was a lot of protest, of course, because a lot of people were saying, well, if we go by that standard, the Capitol building in Washington should be torn down, as well as the White House, because they were built by slave labor as well. Slaves did the heavy lifting. Europeans and American whites did the designing. So we got an interesting world we live in. We need to go forward and not so much backward, or even sideways so much. Sideways only to the point that you're my friend, we work together, we go that way. So, enough of this. Just some thinking on some of these things. Very quickly, the love story. That's basically you guys. And my love for teaching, and so forth. I was at, and the lady is here today, I was at a funeral in the summer of 2016. This lady works on our campus. Her husband had died suddenly. And I attended the funeral here in Camrose. And the pastor, and I did catch his name at the time. I thought of maybe trying to track his name down and mention it, but I thought, I don't really need that. He basically delivered the eulogy for this gentleman who led a good life. And he said, I was trying to think the other day of what I was going to say, and he was at another funeral, an interment is the word, in a cemetery. And he looked at a headstone, and there was the birth year, dash, and the death year. And he said, aha. And he talked about, how do you spend the dash? How do you spend the dash? Now, I talked with a friend of mine recently, and he had heard it somewhere too, so maybe this wasn't all that original. But I love that. I thought, you know what? I have a birth year. I don't know when I'm going to die. You don't know when you're going to die. We all are working on the dash. How are we going to spend it? How are you spending it? How are we spending it? That's the key, the crux to life. How we spend the dash. And let's move away from this man who spent his dash in unusual ways. How many are familiar with her? Oh, I'm quite surprised, actually. It became a hashtag, Becca told me to. We were watching the CBC News a couple years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. This is Becca Schofield, who died February 17th, just, this year. She was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer at the age of 16, New Brunswick girl. And we wept when we watched this stuff on TV. There she was failing, knowing she was dying, and she started a hashtag, Becca told me to, and what she was saying was, she talked about kindness and graciousness and so on, And not only how do we spend the dash, but I'm trying to capture the words here. She said, random acts of kindness. That's what she said. We need to do random acts of kindness. And those of you who are in my classes, you've heard me do the talk once in a while, where I talk about not only how to get into grad school or get the jobs or how to interview or whatever, but being kind and gracious and polite, saying hello and thank you, and just helping people in all kinds of ways, volunteering for this. And one of the wonderful things here at Augustana is that there's so much of that here. You guys, in my mind, are spending the dash very beautifully. And there are random acts of kindness here that we have. She died, I sort of lost track of her, and then turns out 3 days before she died, and I told Danella one night, I said, you know, I wonder whether she's still alive. And couldn't tell from the wiki. This was kind of confusing the way it sometimes is, right? It seemed like she had died, but no, she's not. 3 days later, on the national news, she had died the previous Saturday, the 17th of February. So it made me sad. Now, people are, you know, she's not the only young person to die. We had the hockey players in that horrific, and the other people who were with them, of course, in the horrific crash, and it's happening all the time. But I thought I'd just share that because of the random acts of kindness, the paying it forward, helping your fellow humans, doing what you can. And I encourage you to go easy on your smartphones and things and get into conversing with people, making the eye contact a little more. Getting out into the wilderness too and getting physical maybe, I don't know, all kinds of healthy things. You don't have to be a vegan in my mind. But you know what I mean there. We don't say vegetable and we don't say vegetarian, but we say vegan. I like to joke about it, but I also like good Alberta beef. So anyway, so I thought I'd share that, and I love teaching, and I guess you all kind of know. I want to thank you, young people, and some of you are getting up in years already, who are former students of mine, because I've been here 36 years. There's some there. Tracy Malloy just told me something sweet. I hadn't seen her in years. Anyway, something nice. Thank you. And so it hasn't been a job. It really hasn't been a job. Now, granted, it's not a 9-to-5er. My brother-in-law bugs me all the time about not, having all these summers off and all the free time, and that's true. But it's a labor of love, and it's because of you. You people, you scholars here, past, present, and some of you are just getting started here. The most difficult part of retiring right now for me is the thought that the first-year students that I've just met the one time, I'm gone, and they're going to go year 2 and 3 and 4. But those of you who are 3rd and 4th, I've already been with you for several years, and many of you are graduated already. So it's kind of a little different. We're graduating together because I'm going to be at this year's grad. I plan to be at next year's, and so on. But the first years, there's some really cool people, and it'd be nice to see them in another course and another course as they move on down the academic chain, so to speak. So anyway, I getting all kinds of let me just, I don't want to go on and on. Facebook, okay, we know Facebook's in some kind of trouble right now. I don't want to just beat that. Let's leave that. 3 years ago, wandering around, we did a road trip going and looking at some of Alberta's crazy things like the pierogi in Glendon. This is Mundare with the big sausage. And I'm walking around there, and I hear my name. This is summer of 2015. Jordan Schultz. She's now a school teacher, elementary school teacher there. She recognized me, called me, we took the picture, talked a little bit, and I've run into former students in Ireland and all over Canada. It's so cool. Anyway, I thought that's the Montreal Royals, by the way. That's what Jackie Robinson played for in 1946 before he went to Brooklyn. Okay, and here, this is the wrap. Wine tasting in BC, yes, I don't mind BC wine. And so there we are. The future, I don't know. But Anyway, thank you so much. Any questions or, I don't know, I think I have too many answers, but I can try. I didn't kill myself here. So anyway, thank you so much. Yeah. Oh, right, the questions. What? Oh, okay, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
You want to say something?
Well, thank you again. So live large. What, by that, and I've told some students this, what I mean by that is don't trample others and, push and shove and whatever in life. Live large within yourself. Be all that you're capable of being. And be good in your skin. You're good young people, you're smart, you're attractive, you're hardworking, you're disciplined. Stay within yourself. Be all that you can be. And you'll be good in life. Facebook, nobody needs 700 half-baked friends. If you have a handful, you're in good shape. Make them count, make yourself count. And if there are issues, seek help and communicate. Remember the captain. What we have here is a failure to communicate. Well, communicate. And I'm happy to see you people are. Some of you in this room I know have had personal issues because you've shared them with me. And I see also healing and growth, and I'm happy. And there's been a lot of success. It doesn't always work out, of course. But we're living at a time where people can talk. And if I have one more minute, getting back to that the horrific accident. Sheldon Kennedy, who ended up playing in the National Hockey League, and of course he was also physically abused by one of his coaches. You know that story, I'm sure. He was on that bus with another Broncos team, the Swift Current Saskatchewan Broncos. 4 died in that one, so the numbers, of course, but still 4 people. And Sheldon was talking, I heard him interviewed on Ched, the Oilers show the other day. And he was talking, he was at the hospital there. He went to Humboldt and Saskatoon and comforted and succored the wounded and so on. And he said that, back in the day when he survived, he was one of the survivors. Other than a few friends and family, and immediately at the funerals for the other people, that was it. There were no grief counselors. There were no, he said, we were on our own. And a lot of us suffered because of it. Some of us into alcohol, guilt trips, because we survived, and that sort of thing. So today, and he said today, yes, these people have died, of course. And it's horrible, and the families suffer and grieve, but you're not doing it nearly as alone as it used to be. And you men in the room, don't suck it up continually, because we're supposed to be tough. My sister-in-law a few years ago said I was kind of a metro man, and I took that as a compliment, because I've been known to tear up in some movies. So be a metro man, you guys. You can still be a tough Alberta cowboy and ride into the sunset on your trusty horse along the Cowboy Trail, Highway 22. Or Saskatchewan, as a lot of the hockey players are. And, be sensitive, be tough, and you women, everybody, we're together, okay? Yeah. That's it.